Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Findmypast Live. My name is Ellie. It's lovely to see you all here with us today. I hope you've had a good week. The weather has perked up a bit, which is very nice. We've been having some walks along the beach here, which have been lovely. And I've also been, keeping busy outside of work as well. So I've been reading a lot. I've been doing a little bit of digital drawing. I've been baking. And of course, I've been doing family history as well. I've actually been making some progress on my dad's side, which I will talk a little bit about in a bit. And I hope you've been making exciting new discoveries as well. And if you've joined us before, I'm also coming to the end of my work notebook, which is here. And I'm so torn between, using one of the ones I've got on my bookshelf and just buying a new one. It's just such a difficult decision to make. We've got some people coming and joining us already. We've got Rosie, Linda, Victoria, Kim, Ellen, Jackie, Patricia, who says it's a lovely day. Fantastic. That's good. Okay, I'm glad the weather's better with you guys. I mean, though it is very sort of muggy and warm here in Scotland, it's sort of cloudy at the moment. But yeah, just got to keep hydrated, with my Emma Bridgewater mug while we have a natter about all things family history. So I did also think, going back to the notebook, I did sort of think about whether I should start a separate stream, a separate broadcast on stationery. But I'm just wondering whether that'd be a sort of a clash of interests, possibly. Moving on, we've also got Alex with us in the comments today, so please give him a little bit of a wave. And I hope you're all nice and relaxed today, as it is Friday. I hope you've got a hot beverage of choice and a snack. I actually made some galaxy cheesecake. I say cheesecake, it was more like cheesecakes because I made a big cheesecake and then I had leftover mixture. So I sort of made sort of little ones in ramekins as well. And while they were very, very tasty, I can report back that they were tasty. I didn't quite put enough chocolate in, which was a bit of a shame. But never mind, learn for next time. When do you not need an excuse? When do you need an excuse, excuse me, to actually make a galaxy cheesecake or a chocolate cheesecake or any cheesecake for that matter? But I digress. Welcome everybody. We've also got Sam. Finally managed to get the time right to catch you live. Yay, Sam, that's brilliant. We've got Angela, Rebecca, Georgia, Anita, Peggy, Karen, Eleanor also found us on time. That's good. I actually I scheduled the live video this week, so I hope that's been useful for you because you can set a reminder with it, which is quite handy. So I think we'll be doing that from now on because it means you'll get a notification when we actually go live. We've got Susan. Thank you for doing this. No, thank you for joining. Honestly, I absolutely love it. I know Alex loves it because we rotate Friday to Friday. And it is just a chance for you to all kick back and relax, listen to me talk about family history for about 50 minutes to an hour. And it means you can interact with each other as well. You can talk about your discoveries, your recalls, your interests. I know, for example, you sometimes make connections as well. I know William was talking about his Molyneuxs in Cheshire, and I've got Molyneuxs in Cheshire, and yeah, we're trying to find a connection there. Patricia saying I love stationery, and me too. I have an unhealthy love of stationery probably. Victoria, always good to know best way to make notes and how to categorize what notebooks are great. This is actually a bullet journal. I used to keep a personal bullet journal. I don't do that anymore. I actually do a work bullet journal now. And if you've not heard of bullet journaling, you can also use it for family history. I'll see if I can find you a link on it later on, and I'll pop it in the comments for you guys to have a look. We've got Paul as well. Dawn. Anything with chocolate and is yummy, says Angela. Yes, it is. And Andrea from Australia. We've got Shirley. Looking forward to today's chat. Patricia in Cyprus. Pat in Cardiff. Lots of you today. That's lovely. Thank you so much for joining, everybody. If this is your first time here, we do this every Friday, as I said. 1 week you get Alex, next week you get me. And it's just, as I said, a chance for you guys to relax and we can come together over our, excuse me, frog in my throat. I'm really sorry. A chance for you all to talk about family history together. And this is sort of a more informal, laid back chat. We do also host a Wednesday session as well, which is usually by an expert or a guest. And those are more sort of how to do certain areas of family history. But as I said, those are every Wednesday. Stay tuned for details of next week's Wednesday session. I'll be sharing those at the end. I've got a really exciting guest coming on. I'm really excited. So yeah, and these Wednesday sessions are usually on various topics. So we've had things like photo dating, we've had Paul did British and India on Wednesday, we've got Irish, I even did one on Welsh family history, which was fun. So yeah, I mean, that's where we're at the moment. We've got our 2 sessions a week. And remember, if you can't tune in live, you can always watch them back. They're all on YouTube now, which is great because it's got a fantastic closed captioning system. So check those out. And they're also in the video section of our Facebook page. So you can watch them back at any time. You can pause them, you can take notes, whatever works for you, basically. And let me know if you have any other ideas for other sessions with experts. Always out on the hunt for new ideas. We want to do sessions that you want to see. We did a survey not long ago and we have been taking ideas from that. So keep an eye on what's coming out next, I suppose. In terms of what we're going to be looking at this week, we'll have a look at the new records. We'll do question of the week. And if you didn't catch question of the week, it is what's the most poignant or unexpected discovery you've made in the newspapers so far? And I'm going to be sharing a couple of mine with you as well, which I actually have just made this week, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm far too excited. So if you've not shared that yet, your question of the week answer, pop it in the comments and we will have a look at those a little bit later on. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about newspapers and why they're useful, the kind of things you can discover in them. And hopefully, if you've not looked at newspapers yet as a family history resource, it might be something you will consider doing in the future because they can unlock so much information and knock down brick walls. I cannot recommend newspapers enough, basically, but it's going to be nice and lighthearted. Yeah, but I think we'll move on. We'll start with we'll go into new records in a moment. I'll just have another look at the comments. Sam's saying, I didn't think to use a bullet journal for a family tree. Do you know what, Sam? I was at Roots Tech. Now, was it Roots Tech London or was it Roots Tech in Salt Lake City? I think it was Salt Lake City, actually. There was an early morning session on bullet journaling for family history. I'll see if I can find the person who did it, but I didn't actually manage to get to the session because obviously I was working on the Findmypast stand at the time. This was last year. Goodness, that's a long time ago. Seems like years ago. But yeah, absolutely. It's just a different way to organize your notes. It's just, with a notebook and a pen if you're not familiar with it. But as I said, for those of you not familiar with bullet journaling, I will find some information for you and I will share it in the comments once I'm finished. Because if I do it now, I will just get distracted and we'll talk about bullet journaling for the whole session, which we don't want to do at this point. Maybe I could do a separate session on it. Well, maybe think about that, Sam, okay? Fantastic. Okay, so let's talk new records to begin with. So in case you weren't aware, we release new records on Findmypast every single week, which we are really, really proud of. We actually have a very dedicated and really hardworking licensing team. They go out and they procure these records from all over the place, from all these different sources. And then we also have an amazing data team. And what they do is they digitize these records, they put them on our website, and it means you can search these historical documents from your home. You don't have to go out and go to archives and libraries and family history societies, etc. You can search them from your home. It's all at your fingertips, which is really nice. And although there is something to be said for going to visit archives and libraries because it is quite a nice experience, sometimes it is easier if you can just add in a name, add in a year, and you can search it on your computer, as I'm sure you will all, or hopefully maybe most of you will attest, I think. So this means that every single week, excuse me, I'll start again. Every single week, you've got a new chance to find a new ancestor, break down a brick wall. And as I said, spoiler alert, I'm getting ahead of myself. That happened for me this week. I'm so happy. But what actually have we added this week? Because if you've not had a look at the blog or you've had a look at the email that comes out every week and in case you weren't aware, you can get news of the newest records into your inbox on a Friday morning. Just go to your Findmypast account and opt in to receiving these emails, and you'll get the news every week. So you won't have to listen to me waffle on about them. But I do go into a little bit more detail, though, which I think that validates me doing this. Now, I found lots of examples and lots of tests for you as well. So I'm going to share some of those. I actually really like doing this. I started doing this a couple of weeks ago. I would search. I like searching the new records to find examples for you, just to show you what you can actually find in these records. So the first thing we've added is a bumper crop of Surrey Parish records. Now, these have been provided by the Surrey History Centre and also Surrey County Council. For baptisms, we've got over 550,000 new records. We've got 126 updated parishes there. Now, on the parish list for the Surrey records, it will be marked as to which ones have been updated. They'll be marked with new. For marriages, we've got over 430,000 new records and 182 parishes have been updated. And then for Surrey burials, we've got 330,000 new records and 121 parishes have been updated. And these all come with the transcript and also the original image. And what do we always say? I feel like I'm just repeating myself with these now, but it's so true. If there's an original image, make sure that you check it. So if you've got Surrey ancestors or Surrey roots, there is lots for you to explore this weekend. So hopefully that's your weekend sorted if you're planning on having a quiet one at home. I know I'm planning on having a quiet one at home. Now, I went and had a look at some examples for you, and I only found, which was a real shame, but I don't think my ancestors actually, these ancestors anyway, I don't think they actually lived in Surrey or were born in Surrey. But I did find one. I found a chap called Albert Sidney Overthrow. He was born in 1906 in Gloucester, but he actually married in Surrey. He married a lady called Lily Violet French when he was 25, and this was in 1931. And it gives me loads of information. It tells me that he was a shop assistant. It tells me that his father was a painter, also called Albert Sidney. Why are people not more inventive with their names? They make them more easier to trace. If you've got a long line of Alberts, and Alberts, then it gets really, really difficult to keep track of, actually. I'm sure many of you will agree with that. Anyway, it also tells me from this one record that Lily's father was called James French and he was a college servant. It also gives me the names of the witnesses. So it's Robert Edward Clark and Elsie Louisa Lee. And all of these people have signed the marriage record. So I get the signatures for all of them. And I just think it's really useful when a particular parish actually gives all of this information. So from parish to parish, you tend to have a little bit of a variation in the information that they ask for with the standardized parish sheets. Sometimes it's just a case of names and dates, but some parishes ask for more information, which is really good. So you get things like witnesses and sometimes even addresses and residences as well. So that's really, really handy for me. And then the second record I've got for Albert is his burial record. Now, sadly, he died aged only 35 and he was buried in 1942. And that actually gives me his address as well. Now, I don't know if I would be a family historian if I then didn't fall down the rabbit hole a little bit and try and work out how I'm actually related to Albert, because of the name Overthrow, it's not around very much. So I'm probably related somehow. And I just wanted to find out more information about this chap that I'd just done a very quick search in the Surrey Parish records on. So I went and did a little bit of digging. I couldn't help myself. I found him on the 1939 register. At the same address he was at when he died. He was living with Lily, who later appeared to marry again, actually, because on the 1939 register record, her surname Overthrow, her married surname, is actually crossed out and replaced with Morris. So this means that she later married somebody called Morris, probably after Albert died, I would imagine. And then Albert is listed as a grocery salesman, and they also have a son called Peter, who was born in 1937. And a quick look in the marriage records told me that Lily married a chap called Leslie Morris in Eton in 1943. I then also went and had a look at the newspapers and found Albert's birth announcement in the Gloucester Citizen, and that gave me the address of his parents and also his father's name, which was Albert, which we already knew. And then I had a quick look in the 1911 census as well. Once I start doing these, I can't stop. Now, the 1911 census told me that Albert and his parents were Alberts, which we already knew, and his mother was called Minnie. He had 3 siblings, and they were living in Merthyr Tydfil in Wales at this time. And going back further, I went and had a look in the 1891 census, and it tells me that Albert Senior's was born in 1881. He was born in Wales, and his parents were Samuel and Jane, and that Samuel was a railway porter. And then further back again, I got back to 1871. Samuel is in Devon at this time. He's 17 years old and he's in the Royal Navy. And I also found his baptism, and it tells me that his parents were called John and Sarah. And unfortunately, that's where my little trip down the rabbit hole ended. I got stuck after 1871. I couldn't find them in the 1861 census. I probably could have found them if I tried for a little bit longer, but I was running out of time. Isn't it always the case? So that's a challenge for you. See if you can find John and Sarah Overthrow in the 1861 census with young Samuel as a boy. But I digress. Moving on swiftly. There were also a couple of notable people who lived in Surrey as well. We've got Lewis Carroll, the author of Alice in Wonderland. He was buried in Guildford in 1898. You've got Beatrix Potter, author of the Peter Rabbit series, amongst many others, lots of my childhood favourites. She actually had a holiday home in Surrey. And although I didn't find a Surrey record for her, I did find her on the 1939 register in Lancashire under her married name, which was Helen B. Heelis, believe it or not. I didn't know that until today. I just always thought she was Beatrix Potter, but no, that was not her married name. And then you've also got P.G. Woodhouse as well. He was actually born in Surrey in 1881. He was baptized at St. Nicholas Church, and I did find his baptism record. It gives me his baptism date of the 17th of November. It gives me the church, the residence, the father's name, his occupation, and his mother's first name, which was Eleanor. So that's the Surrey records for you. Now, before we move on to what we've added with the newspapers, let's have a quick look at the comments and see what you guys are chattering about in here. Now, I think Alex is also nattering along with you. Let's scroll back up and see what we've got here. Looking now. Sylvia saying hello. Victoria, bullet journaling sounds interesting. I'm going to have to do a separate session on bullet journaling because otherwise I will just go off on a tangent. But it's super useful. I'm actually quite unorganized. I have to keep notes of absolutely everything. So it's helped me a great deal. Nicole saying, hi guys, I'm a bit late today. No worries, nice to see you, Nicole. We've got a couple of question of the day answers, which I will leave until later on. Carol, hi from Cornwall. Lovely. Marion from Ireland. Lots of comments. Pat, our archives here in Cardiff haven't reopened to the public yet. Yeah, a lot of them haven't, but I think they're getting there, which is really nice because I know a lot of you are quite keen to get back to the archives, back to the libraries, etc. Fantastic. Lots of people. Linda from Philadelphia. Fantastic. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through. I've got so many to read through. Sam, most of my ancestors lived in Surrey. These are going to be exciting records. Going to be a busy few days. Oh, fantastic. Let us know what you find. I always like to hear your stories. It's why I ask so often why we do the question of the week. We just love hearing what you found and what you're researching. Right, I think I'm almost up to date with those comments now. Yes, I am. Okay, so let's move on to newspapers. And this is probably going to take up, we're going to talk about these for a bit, and then what we'll do question of the week, and then we'll talk about newspapers in a little bit more detail afterwards. So in terms of what we've added for newspapers this week, we've added it's over 136,000 pages, which is really, really exciting. 24 existing titles that we've got have been updated. So there's over 150 years worth of history there. Excuse me a second. So there's a long list of titles that you can go and explore for some new years. The updated titles include the Newcastle Journal, the Brighton Gazette, the Wexford Independent, and the Leicester Chronicle. And not just that, we've actually added 3 brand new titles as well. So the first one we've got is the Sporting Chronicle. It was founded in 1871. It was published as a daily in Manchester. Excuse me, let's rephrase that. It was published daily in Manchester. This is what happens when I get to the end of the day on a Friday and all I want to do is go and have a nap. I'll do that afterwards. As soon as we finish up here, I'll go and have a nap. So the original emphasis of this Sporting Chronicle was on horse racing, but it did later focus on other sports as well, especially athletics. So if you have a keen interest in sport history, or if you have an ancestor who is involved in horse racing, for example, go and check it out. The years we've got for this title are 1889, 1907 to 1908, and 1916 as well. So we'll probably add more to that as we digitize more. Brilliant. And the next one we've got is the Rochdale Times. This was begun in the 1870s, and it has so many different features and so many different sections in it. So things like accidents and offences, foreign intelligence. It had features on literature and poems, and also local Rochdale news as well, of course. So we've added for this quite a range of different years. So we've got 1872 to 1879, 1898 to 1899, 1910 to 1912, and 1914 to 1923. So it also covers the years of the First World War as well. Paul's saying, I'd like to see the Express and Star Wolverhampton. Let's add it to the list. There's lots that are going to be coming out. We're digitizing more all the time, so do keep checking back. And the third addition to the newspapers for this week, and this is the one I'm perhaps most excited about, is the North Wales Weekly News. Now, this was founded by a local printer called Robert Evans Jones, and it first appeared in 1889, and it had the very long title of the Weekly News and Visitors Chronicle for Colwyn Bay. It was originally printed in Llandudno, and then in 1900, Robert's brother William built a print works at Conway Quay, and it stayed there until 1972 when it moved to its current location at Llandudno Junction, and it's still in print today, which is really exciting. So we've added the years 1956 to 1980 for this title, so more recent as well, which is really, really good. Peter's saying, can someone confirm if the newspapers on FMP as the same on British Newspaper Archive? Pretty much the same content, yes. What's really good about the British Newspaper Archive is that it's got a more advanced search, so that's really handy. But we've also got them on Findmypast as well, which is brilliant. And we also hint against them as well. We've got stories in your tree, so definitely give those a try. Now, as many of you who have tuned in before may know, I'm from North Wales. So as I said, this title was quite exciting for me. So I went and had a look to see what I could find. And I found a wedding announcement for my grandparents in 1958 that I had never seen before. Now, I'm pretty sure my grandmother actually has a copy of this somewhere, either from this paper or from a different one, but I'd never seen it. I found this, and it's really quite detailed. It tells me their parents' names and addresses. It tells me where they married, where the reception was, who the best man was, who the bridesmaids were, the groomsmen, who the organist was even. That's just such rich detail. That I doubt even my grandmother knows who played the organ at her own wedding. But that, that would now remind her. And what I thought was really lovely, it gave this lovely description at the end, and I'll read this out to you. It says, given away by her father, the bride wore a full-length gown of white figured brocade, and her shoulder-length veil held in place by a headdress of orange blossom. Her bouquet was of white carnations. She was attended by her sister, Miss Anne Davies, and her cousin, Miss Barbara Smith. Both wore dresses of turquoise brocade with headdresses of sweet peas and carried bouquets of sweet peas. And I was just amazed at finding this. I'm sure if you found similar ones at home, if you found similar ones in the newspapers, things like this that are so close to you, I got goosebumps just talking about this. It was really special for me to find that. My grandfather sadly is no longer with us, but I did tell my mum that I found this, and hopefully she'll go and tell my grandmother. Um, so yeah, it was just really nice to see it. And I also found a funeral announcement for my two times grandmother in 1960. And again, such rich detail that's available here. It tells me that she was 85 when she died. It gives me her address, that she grew up in Birmingham, which I knew, of course. But imagine if I didn't know that. That would then I would then know where to look for her birth record. I know to look in Birmingham. I also get the names of the chief mourners, and this includes my great grandparents and my grandparents. They're all named. So both of these I'd never seen before, and of course, as I said, I had to immediately tell my mum, and I'm hoping she'll tell my grandma as well. So yeah, that's my little discovery in the newspapers this week. I was really happy. Yeah, but we'll move on. Let's talk question of the week for you guys now about the most poignant or unexpected discoveries you've made in the newspapers. Brilliant. Okay, so now I had some of these submitted ahead of time, so we'll do those first. But as I said, if you've not put your answer to question of the week in yet, just pop it in the comments and I will scroll through the comments in a bit and we will have a read through some of those. Now, while I was reading some of the pre-submitted ones, these are quite, some of them are quite, what's the word I'm looking for? They're quite emotional, I suppose. A lot of these are, some of them were quite shocking as well. Some of them are nice to read, some not nice to read, but I think it's important that we read these and we acknowledge them because they are part of our history after all. So let's have a look and see what we've got here. So first one is from Patricia, who says, I found what happened to the brothers of my paternal grandparents due to inquests being in a local newspaper. My grandparents' children lived close to each other near the same stretch of the Stourbridge Canal. My grandmother's eldest brother Solomon died before she was born. He went one afternoon to the canal alone, aged 9, in 1874, and may have been jumping across the tied up boats. His body was found in the canal at 9 p.m. the day he went missing. My grandfather's youngest brother died in 1885, aged 8, where he tried to jump from a tied boat to a moving boat. He slipped into the canal and died of crush injuries, being caught between the two boats and immersion. That's so sad, Patricia. And just the fact that you found that detail from the newspaper records, I mean, you would find some detail on a death certificate, but it wouldn't go into this much detail. It really wouldn't. And just the fact that you've got the context of the canal as well, I just think that's so sad. And obviously your grandfather's youngest brother being only 8 at the time. But at least you know that and you can remember them. I think that's just so important. We've got Nicole here who says she found her great 3 times great grandfather in the papers once or twice being in a fight, and then another for a court case in Wales in the 1800s. If your ancestors had a brush with the law, the newspapers are a great place to look. You can find some detail in the crime records, but one of the best places to look are the newspapers. Again, you'll have to take into consideration the journalist or the newspapers, writing style. They may have sensationalized some of the details. For example, they might be what's the word I'm looking for? They might be biased in their outlook. That's what I was looking for. Bear that in mind, take it with a pinch of salt, but you can still get so much detail from one newspaper report. Now Paul submitted this. Now apologies, Paul. I'm not going to read the full report from this because I think some of it is quite it is quite graphic, as you rightly say with this. So I'm just going to read part of it. So Paul says, my 3 times great aunt Clara Thompson, 1837 to 1876, was murdered by her husband Richard. She was on her way to market on the 1st of April with a friend in Southport, and he attacked her, slashing her face and throat. She didn't die straight away and was taken to hospital, where 2 days later gave birth to a boy. Gosh, she was pregnant. Wow. And then after contracting a fever, she died on the 12th of April. The baby survived and was taken in by her sister and husband. She'd also had 7 children previously. The newspaper reports are really, really graphic, and perhaps the most graphic I found on the website. He was found not guilty of murder, as the judge directed the jury that they could not be sure if the injuries were resulting of her death was as a result of the injuries or the fever. But he said he'd never seen such a horrific case and sentenced him to penal servitude for life, even though, yeah, excuse me, I'm reading this wrong. Yeah, he was not guilty of murder, but penal servitude for life, even though her husband pled guilty to the lesser charge. The judge had never seen a case so close to murder as this. And Paul said, I also found the prison records for him on Findmypast too, and he was released after 20 years. That's, I don't quite know where to start that with that one, Paul, but it's just so unbelievably tragic and unnecessary for a mother of 7 and then 8 children to die in such a horrible way, basically. But good that you managed to find the different kind of records and cross-reference them as well. And yeah, it's good that you found it, good that you can remember her, and that you've got a full report of what happened as well in terms of the court case. We've got Denise here who says, I found an article on my grandfather as a boy of 11 after he'd been hit by a bus and ended up with a broken leg. It puts some flesh on the bones of a man who died when my dad was only 15. I completely agree. I think sometimes there are these people who you maybe should have known, but because of certain circumstances, you didn't end up knowing them. I was the same with my grandfather. He died when my father was 2. So again, these are people that you don't unfortunately get the chance to meet, and maybe you should have done if circumstances were different. So Denise, I'm really pleased that you managed to hear, that you managed to find this about your grandfather. I'm hoping his broken leg was fixed up, and that he obviously made a good recovery as well, which is nice. And then we've got Anya. Now, Anya's unfortunately not joining us today. And I say unfortunately, it's actually her birthday. So happy birthday to Anya. I hope you're enjoying it and that you've had lots of presents and you've been spoiled. And I hope you'll be able to catch up at another time. So Anya says, my answer to question of the week was finding my 2 times great grandfather writing to the newspapers in Wigan, giving an insight into what he saw while he was gold mining in Borneo in 1900. That's amazing. I love stories like that. I don't know if any of you have caught any of the luminaries on the BBC, but that's all about gold mining as well. I just love stories like that. Anything to do with prospecting and gold. I don't know, I just eat it all up, stuff like that. Nikki says, a report of 9 people who drowned during a fog. She kindly submitted the actual snipping of the newspaper article for me for this. So thank you, Nikki. Now, this particular article, as I said, it gives details of 9 people who drowned while there was really, really bad fog. And it actually names some of them as well. So you've got John Colley, who was 25. He was a lock labourer. James Ansell, 33, a stove fitter. James Dykov, 44, a lighterman. William Hall, also a lighterman. And these are all mentioned in the article Nikki shared. And I believe, Nikki, correct me if I'm wrong, all of these people died within 1 or 2 nights of really awful fog, and they just tripped into the water and unfortunately didn't survive, which is really sad. May Rees says, my great-grandmother Eliza Fulford, aged 10, was on the Red Rover steamship in 1850 when it blew up in Bristol Harbour, and it killed her 2 sisters and her stepmother. That's just heartbreaking. Again, it's things like this when you don't quite expect a death, so to speak. It's it's not a natural death, and it's just so sad and just so tragic. And we've got Elaine here. I found that my grandfather saved a little girl from drowning the year before my dad and his twin sister were born. The story had never been passed down. He died when the twins were just a year old. I looked up some history on the little girl. She grew up, she married, and she had children of her own. And just think, Elaine, like if your grandfather hadn't been there, that would have never happened for that little girl, and that's just so special. I love that you traced her and saw what happened to her afterwards. I just think that's lovely. We've got Heather said she discovered that her maternal great grandparents were mentioned in a newspaper having witnessed a disturbance in a village in Wales. We've got Ellen. A newspaper article was entitled Pay the Fiddle. During Prohibition, my husband's grandmother was arrested for selling beer. She was hosting a gathering at the family farm, and to get around paying her directly, the guests would put money in a slot in the musician's bass fiddle. Oh, this is brilliant. This way, no one was selling the beer, just the fiddle. She was fined half the costs of the trial, the other half being charged the fiddler. She took the money out of her stocking and paid the fine in full. That's a brilliant story, Ellen. Thank you for sharing that. And Kim says that her family liked appearing in newspapers. Her second great grandfather was also printed them. On my dad's side, I have a third great uncle who died at the age of 5 after eating tree berries from a rowan tree, I think. He lingered in pain for several days. And there was my second great uncle who was fined £10 in the early 1900s for breaking a promise of marriage. She went out to sort her dress, went to the church, and he married somebody else. That's a little bit awkward. Now, I think that's all the ones I had submitted ahead of time. So thank you so much for submitting those, everybody. Now let's go and have a look at the comments and have a look and see what you guys have submitted now for me. Just trying to scroll back up to the top. Sylvia says, this week I have found a lot of newspaper reports of my first cousin 3 times removed, who was a very naughty boy. More details, Sylvia, please. One of his punishments included 3 years in Dartmoor. Oh dear. Sorry, just scanning through these. Georgia says, I found an article on my great uncle who was sentenced to 6 months imprisonment for stealing a velvet coat in 1855 in Bury St Edmunds. It's just stealing a coat. 6 months, it's incredible. Eleanor says, newspapers unlocked the cause of my father-in-law's accidental death. It was truly amazing. I'd love to hear more about that. Scrolling. Rosie. Now I'm going to have to expand this. There we go. Most poignant was the report of my great-great-grandmother's inquest. She died of burns having fallen downstairs carrying a paraffin lamp, which set her clothes on fire. It set me thinking, is this why, when I was a child, I suddenly froze on the stairs and had to be carried down? Is there such thing as a genetic memory? Maybe, Rosie. I've actually got a memory of when I was quite young, and my younger sister, she was only, I think, 2 at the time, and we were on holiday camping, and we were told over and over again, don't touch the lamp, it's hot. And of course, my sister, maybe not being quite old enough to understand, she touched it and she burnt herself quite badly. And to this day, I struggle touching things that are hot. Up until, say, the age of 17, 18, I wouldn't cook because I was paranoid of burning myself on the oven or on the stove. So I can completely understand that. What have we got here? Sorry, I'm still scrolling, everybody. My apologies. Still scrolling. Okay, so we've got Anne. I saw a court case on another site, not guilty, then checked for the newspaper report on Findmypast and found an earlier one for 1837 for my great-great-grandfather when his wife was about to have their second child. My grandfather was 1 year old at the time. He got 14 days, and as he could not pay the fine along with 2 others, they then found 3 of their sons poaching 30 years later as well. Yes, they were found guilty of poaching. Huh. And you found different reports of that, Anne. That's interesting. Let's keep scrolling. Keep on scrolling. Lots of requests for more newspapers as well. Obviously ones that you're quite keen to get your hands on. As I said, We're digitizing these all the time. We've got a fantastic team who digitize these in Boston Spa, and then the digital files are sent up to Dundee, and they are made searchable through OCR and things like that, as I will touch on again in a little bit. So do keep an eye out. And I've just realized the time is 20 to 5. I can't believe I've been talking for 40 minutes already. Let's still keep going. Alex saying easy to end up down a rabbit hole. I've got to be quite strict with myself when researching for work. Yeah, I agree with you, Alex. I had to go, no, that is enough now, earlier today when I was doing my notes for today. Jackie saying 2 John Overthrows in Gloucestershire poll book in 1818, Ron rejected as a poll. I will have to go and have a look. One of them is probably my ancestor. There's not many of us. My apologies. It takes me ages to scroll through these because it's amazing that you guys are talking amongst each other, which I absolutely love. But I'm just trying to pick out the question of the day comments, you see. Karen says, my great uncle, who was a wheelwright, was fixing a wheel and his shirt got caught in the cogs. It ripped his arm off and he died about 8 hours later. It was in the newspaper. Yeah, that is incredibly sad. I think so many people who do these quite physical jobs, they can often put themselves in quite a lot of danger. You know, whether you've got mining ancestors, for example, it's just it wasn't uncommon, which is really, really sad. Sam, I found an incident reported about a horse and cart having a crash with a manure pile in Ireland, but it was covered by several newspapers. And found 2 different views of the same incident. Yeah, that's honestly not unusual, Sam, as I'm sure you already know. Again, it will depend on the bias and the viewpoint of the newspaper and the journalist in question. They might have spoken to different witnesses, for example. So as I said, although these are amazing, these newspapers, just take them with a pinch of salt because they're still written by fallible human beings, so to speak. Oh, we've got Miko on. Hi, Miko, if you're still watching. There's a very unexpected story of someone who appears in our records in the newspapers, the great Professor Alfonso, who was a homeless wizard that would gather all the children of the towns of Fife in a group, take a penny from each of them, and say, who wants to see a magic show? He would throw flour in the air, shout loudly, and then run as fast as he could away with all the money. He did this in almost every town he could before he was caught, and he's in our newspapers and the criminal records. That's brilliant, Miko. Thank you for sharing that. What else have we got? Any more newspaper stories for me? Paul says, my great-grandmother was sentenced to 3 months hard labour for the manslaughter for the murder of her 14-year-old daughter in 1896. Found the record in the Times. Wow, that's just so sad. I've got a comment from Andrew here. On a nicer note, Ellie, my double great-grandfather Thomas Davies, I have ones like that, double great-grandfathers as well, by the way, who were also, I think, Davies's. Maybe it's a Davies thing. That he was married twice. His second wife had a daughter who was a ward of court. Her father was known, but when Sarah got married, instead of putting her real father on her wedding certificate, she put my great-great-grandfather. He was an organist, and when he died in 1919, 200 people turned up to his funeral. 200 people. That's quite lovely, actually. I like that. Right, I think I am up to date in the comments, so I'm going to move on. I'm going to talk just a little bit more about newspapers before we finish up, because it's 4:45 now. Now, as I said, I don't want this to turn into a sort of an expert session, because I'm not an expert in newspapers, and many of my colleagues have given expert sessions on how to use newspapers. So you can watch those back from the video section of our Facebook page. However, now that we've looked at some of your discoveries, I want to take you back to why newspapers can be so useful for our ancestors. And if listening to these has not been proof enough and you've not looked at them yet, hopefully I can convince you otherwise. Now, newspapers in general, they are so old, and we're not even sure when the first one came into being, because before newspapers as we think of them came into being, they had sort of like pamphlets and journals and things that were printed, and they were sort of handed out in the street. But sort of a daily or weekly title. This was sort of first introduced in the early 1700s, although again there is some debate as to whether the Mercurius Caledonius in Edinburgh, that was founded in 1660. There's some debate as to whether that's Scotland's first newspaper, but it didn't last for very long actually, which is a bit of a shame. And then you've got the Daily Courant, which is reportedly London's first daily newspaper. Again, that was early 1700s. And then you've got things like the Review in 1704. That was a forerunner of the Tatler. And then you've also got the modern Lloyd's List that actually started in 1702. And if you don't know already, the amount of times we've been talking about newspapers, we at Findmypast have a great collection of historical newspapers, and they're also on our sister website, the British Newspaper Archive. And these are being digitized all the time. It means it's quite a long process actually. It means taking old newspapers that are printed ones, paper copies. It means taking them out of storage. You might have to do some restoration work on them. Then they get scanned, and then, as I said, they then have the files get sent to our Dundee office. Then we've got a brilliant team there who digitize them, and they are run through OCR. So it means that a digital copy of the text is made, which means you can then search names, you can search dates, you can search places and keywords, and it means you don't have to go to a library or an archive and flick through microfilm because it's quite exhausting doing that actually. Family history is exhausting at times anyway, but looking through microfilm is quite tiring. So what can you actually find? I mean, why would you even bother with newspapers if you haven't already? So just from listening to the question of the week answers, you can just find so much. There's such a vast array of information. So you might be interested in history more generally. For example, you could go and read about reports of the Titanic sinking, of the First World War, of Queen Victoria's coronation. There's loads of stuff you can look at. But then more thematically, you could look at social history, crime history, military history, fashion, sport, and more besides. So this is all not including family history for a moment. This is if you've got an interest in history and you want to use newspapers for that. We actually get a lot of academics using the newspapers. We get a lot of TV shows using them as well. So you might have seen if you caught A House Through Time recently, they used some of our newspapers, which was brilliant to see those. And then for your ancestors specifically, you can find news reports, you can find advertisements. For example, if your ancestor had a business, you can find family notices, things like obituaries, letters. There's just so much available. And in terms of what our collection covers, the short answer is to that actually just a lot. And again, I can't keep saying this enough, but there's still more to come. There's still so much left we've got to do. The collection is mainly regional titles from the 19th century into the 1950s, but we do have either side, so early 1700s, and as I said, with the North Wales Weekly News, that goes up to 1980 at the moment. We've also got things like lifestyle papers, we've got things like the Tatler, love the Tatler. We've got some national titles, excuse me, this is what happens when I talk for too long. We've even got some titles for British India, we've got Welsh language titles. As I said, the earliest ones are from the early 1700s. I think the earliest one we've got is the Dublin Intelligence. And while we've already looked at your discoveries, which thank you so much for sharing, by the way, I can never quite what's the word I'm looking for? I can never quite tell you how grateful I am that you feel comfortable sharing your discoveries with me and with everybody else as well. I just think it's lovely, and I think when we all come together and talk about family history, I just think that's magical. Anywho, I went and had another look at my father's line. So my mother's line is reasonably simple to do. I mean, they're the overthrows. My father's line are the Joneses. Would you believe the Joneses? Oh, yeah, they're tricky. Anyway, I'm trying to find a connection to a Findmypast colleague, because we think we might have a connection somewhere that we might actually be related. But I won't tell you who it is yet because we've still yet to prove it. I'm trying to find this connection. So I've been working on my Rogers line. So this is my 4 times great grandparents, William Rogers and Mary Griffiths. They lived in Shropshire in the mid 1800s. Now, I know from information that was passed down to me by my aunt that William's father was also William, helpful, I know, and that William Senior was an innkeeper. That is about as far as I've got. And it's taken a lot of researching the census records to find out more information. And I did find them, and it gave me the name of the inn that my family members owned and lived in for about 60, 70 years, I think. So this inn was called the Tankerville Arms in Worthing in Shropshire. And it wasn't, don't get me wrong, as I said, this wasn't easy because Worthing is on the border between England and Wales. So in some records it appears as Shropshire, and others it appears as Montgomeryshire. So it's been quite tricky, but it just goes to show, make sure that if you can't find what you're looking for, broaden your search outside of the county, especially if the town you're looking for was on a border. So where did I look next after this? And of course, the answer was the newspapers. I just searched for the Tankerville Arms and I found adverts, I found details of court cases and hearings that were held there, because I think what I've learned from researching the inn in the newspapers is it was the centre of quite a small little community. So this is why it had the court cases and the hearings held there. And then there were also incidents that happened there. So I think 2 murders happened there, some drunken brawls, and it gives me details of who lived there and worked there as well. And all of this has helped me build a sort of broader picture of my ancestors' lives while they worked and owned this inn. And as I said, it was clearly a central place for this small community hub. And it's, as I said, it's just helped build a bigger picture for me and put some more context into their lives, and I wouldn't have been able to do that without the newspapers. So, so yeah. And I also found, by searching for the Tankerville Arms, I found a death notice for a chap called Thomas Rogers. He was the brother of William Jr., who was my direct ancestor. Thomas was born in 1832. He died in 1903, and his funeral notice states that age 71, Thomas Rogers of Pentivin, the last son of the late William Rogers, late of the Tankerville Arms in Hope. And what I thought was quite special, that this is 1903, and still the old innkeeper, William Rogers Senior, who was born in around 1795, is still being remembered in this newspaper article over 100 years on. And I just think that's brilliant. And it's helped me connect so many dots. I'm just grateful for these newspapers, as I'm sure you are as well, with all of your fantastic discoveries. So let's have a look at the comments. Andrew says, I'm in Shropshire and have that issue. I think the pub still exists. Does it? Road trip? Well, maybe not. Maybe not right now. Maybe when we're not in the middle of a pandemic. Victoria asking, what are the latest date records? If you could just clarify which records you're referring to. If you're referring to the newspapers, we have newspapers going up to the 2000s. But if you're talking about different records, just let me know. And I'm sure either I can answer that or Alex can. We've got Sue saying, my 2 times great aunt's death was reported in the newspapers. She fell from a balcony and broke and landed on the railings below, survived for 2 days, but died of pneumonia 2 days later in 1866. That's really sad. Really sad indeed. Lots of stories being shared today, everybody. Really, really grateful for that. And I think that probably brings me to the end of my newspaper chat, I suppose, and new records that you've all got to explore this weekend. So thank you for joining in and participating. It's always a pleasure being able to do this and to chat to you all. I wish there was a way we could all have some sort of like, I don't know, like a group conference call, but with so many of us, I think it would just it would get a little bit hectic. Pat saying, funnily enough, I was browsing through the Police Gazette for something the other day, didn't find what I was looking for, but maybe I might find something in the Illustrated Police News. That's a brilliant newspaper, as long as you take it with a huge pinch of salt, because it's so sensationalist that I don't know if any of you watched Miss Scarlet and the Duke on Alibi over in the UK, but that actually features the Illustrated Police News, and yeah, some of the stories they just they do blow them up a little bit, so to speak. Rebecca saying thank you. No, thank you for joining. It's been lovely. Thank you, Victoria. And also, you heard it here first. Next week on Wednesday at 4 o'clock, I have a very special guest joining me. We've got fashion historian Dr. Kate Strasdin, and we're going to be chatting about fashion for your everyday ancestors and what it meant for them. So that's Wednesday at 4 o'clock, and then Alex is going to be back on Friday. So please continue to share your discoveries. Come and join in the fun at the Findmypast forum. Remember to answer the membership question. All you need to do is say your experience and why you'd like to join in terms of your experience with family history, whether you're a beginner, whether you're an expert, etc. So yeah, thank you, Rosie. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Sylvia. Jackie, my favourite hour of the week. Thanks, Jackie. It's my favourite hour of the week too. I think Alex would actually say the same. I absolutely loved being able to do this. And I hope at some point in the near future we'll be having family history conferences again where we can come and meet you all. Because last time I was, the two Roots Tech conferences I've attended have just been brilliant, and I get to speak to people face to face, and it's just wonderful. I love it. Absolutely love it. Georgia, thank you very much. Linda, sorry, had a fall and not comfy to sit long, back next week. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Linda. I hope you feel better. Andrew, if I can help with your Shropshire links, just shout. You'll wish you hadn't said that, Andrew. That's where I'm stuck at the moment. Victoria looking to fashion for next week, and Sam as well. What I'll do is I'll do the same thing again. So I'll set the reminder for the live session. I'll do that on maybe Monday next week, and you guys can set the reminder for it to make sure that you don't miss it. But as I said, if you do miss it, don't worry, you can always watch back. Trisha, thank you. Never had the chance to listen before. Well, I'm glad you could join us today, Trisha. That was lovely. Well, I think we'll leave it there. It is 3 minutes to the hour. Have a fantastic weekend. Stay safe. And I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.